we
7:20?
no, I'm saying that we will have to come back.
Yeah.
We'll have to come back. So tell me when you're live.
Not right now. I'm just gonna- I think we just wait like a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back to your PowerPoint show.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa usalli wa usallam ala Sayyid al-awwaleen wal akhirin. Nabiyyina Muhammadan wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. All praise are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be constantly showered upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the master of the first and the last, and on his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. As to what follows, my beloved brothers and sisters, to our friends, to our viewers and listeners, I begin with the greeting words of the righteous. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, another opportunity has come to us to bask in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to reflect upon what is happening in the world through the lens of the last revelation. And so, in that light, we have developed the idea of dealing with an issue that we call minarets and thrones. The minaret, of course, represents the masjid, the leadership of the community, and the throne represents the kings, the emirs. So it's sort of like the scholars and the kings, the scholars and the sultans. And that relationship and how it has developed over the years, we have to realize that knowledge for knowledge's sake is something which is not of the most benefit. Ilmun nafia, beneficial knowledge is that which we take in and we learn and we implement it. So it's something that is relevant to the time period that we're living in. And it is said that Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, when he used to deliver his Friday sermon, he would speak, sometimes he would lower his voice, sometimes raise his voice. His eyes even got red sometimes. And on some occasions, he spoke as though there was an army just in back of the mountains, close. Now you can imagine the emotion and the fervor of a person who is speaking to his people, motivating his people, because there's an army about to attack them. So that is relevancy. And so our teachings also need to be relevant. And when we look at Islamic studies, when we look at the present situation with knowledge, the context is critical. We learned before that even studying the Quran itself, if you want to understand a verse, if you want to understand a chapter in the Book of Allah, one of the elements that you need is what is called Asbab an-Nuzul, and that is the reasons why it was revealed. What are the reasons? And when you understand the reason why the verse was revealed, this is like the context. Then you get the full benefit out of the subject itself, because the Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years for living situations. Okay, so that's the context. So similarly, any course that we are doing, especially we're focusing on Islamic history and Islamic experiences, of the people. Um, that is something that really requires a type of context. So when we have the context, then we are able to understand the subject even more. And so I would be amiss not to look at what is happening in the world. And the fact that we have chosen this subject of scholars and sultans, the minarets and the thrones, is critical for us in the sense of where we're at. If we look at the world today, there are many different threats, but there are three existential threats that really threaten organized human existence. That's the rest of the sentence. Okay, so human beings as an organized group on this earth. Right now, there are three issues amongst the many, which are existential. And so this sort of sets a background for what we want to look at historically. And when you do that, you benefit more from history, because history is human experience. History is not supposed to be just facts and figures that you learn in order to feel that you know something. And so in terms of these threats, the obvious elephant in the room, in a sense, is the climate catastrophe. And no doubt, although it's not put necessarily on the front page, but it is something that is getting stronger and stronger and stronger by the moment. And if it is not dealt with, it actually is threatening our existence. Global warming right now has gone past the point that they considered 1.5, degrees Celsius. It's gone past this warming level for over a year. We've been past the point of danger in terms of global warming. So what has it done? It has created the hottest year in history. Since records have been taken, there's never been a year that has been hotter. And now we are facing, in terms of August, September, actually the hottest months. I have a family member, my daughter is living in Saudi Arabia in Jubail. And just the other day, she showed us the temperature that came, on their screens. And it was 47 Celsius, 47. And this is Jubail. So if you factor in humidity, because it's right on the water, very humid, it would be in the 50s, literally in the 50s. And even in India itself, and if you go to Djibouti and the deserts of East Africa, and even to America, to the Salt Lake, you're going to see some temperatures that are hard to come to grips with. And if it continues going like this, there will be large sections of the world that will be almost impossible to live in. So no matter what we try to appease ourselves with, reality is it is unbelievably hot. Secondly, what's happening, not only heat, it is rain, water. So floods are now happening, unbelievable level. Of course, in Bangladesh, the huge flood, you see it on your screens, all right? Nigeria, recently in the northeast section of Nigeria, Maiduguri and Borno area, unbelievable floods. You're talking millions of people displaced. Even in Europe itself, right now, the floods are pouring. And it's all over the world that this is happening. So water is now pouring down, and the dams that human beings set up in order to collect the water and produce electricity, dams are breaking. So what that means is also sea level is rising. So there'll be many different states, countries who have borders on the oceans that are in serious trouble right now. And it's going to get worse and worse by the day. It's also producing tropical storms. And so the hurricanes and the typhoons and the storms, the monsoon season, unbelievable what is happening now. So not only too much rain, but too little. So this climate catastrophe is also creating droughts on an unbelievable level. And these droughts, heat waves are happening. Forest fires, the fires are breaking out. Even in Canada, we're suffering from fires. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, for what is happening in a lot of places. So really, this climate catastrophe, this is becoming existential. Secondly, in terms of the context of why we're studying what we are studying now, is the issue of the destruction of the international rules-based order. And what I mean by that is that human beings developed, especially after the Great World Wars, human beings tried to develop United Nations, and there were different conventions and different contexts or different rules that were set up, rules of engagement, not only for peace, but even for war. How do you fight war? What are the limits of war? And we are at the point where this rules-based order is falling apart. The situation in Palestine right now, it has gone beyond description. The level of suffering that the people are going through, the genocide that is happening, the starvation being used as a weapon, disease that is breaking out amongst the people, out and out murder that is happening. And the United Nations is against it. The international courts of justice are against it. The majority of the world, 99% of the world, of the countries of the world are against it, but yet it continues. So what does that mean? That means that the present rules-based order that we set up in order to deal with extreme circumstances of violence and genocide are becoming ineffective. They're not working anymore. And that would take us back to what they would say in Arabic, Qanun al-Ghaba, and that means the law of the jungle. You're going back to what some would say medieval times, when the Mongols were there, when the Crusades were there, when it was just might makes right completely. No conventions, no rules. And that is going to be catastrophic in the world that we are living in today, especially because of the third issue of the existential threats, again, which is an elephant in the room. People know it's there, but don't want to think about it. And that is the nuclear threat. Now, after the nuclear bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and this is just give you a picture of Japan, in Hiroshima, what it looked like after they dropped the atomic bomb on this city. They were forced to try to deal with certain conventions. How are we going to control this thing? The Americans really did not have to drop the bomb. But by dropping the bomb, they were literally showing to the world, we are now the leader. We are the biggest dog on the block. Okay, we are the world's superpower. So it was a power move that was made. But the information was not confined to America because there were scientists from other countries that actually helped to develop these weapons. And so they had to develop what is called a doomsday clock. And this is where, because of the proliferation of these nuclear weapons now, it started to spread, and they became a weapons race in this area. Because of this, they developed this doomsday clock, which is saying, like, how close are we to the point where the nuclear weapons are going to be fired? How close are we to this? And the latest information is saying that we're 90 seconds before midnight. That's what they're saying right now. We're 90 seconds before midnight. Midnight is nuclear holocaust, nuclear destruction. And when it happens, it's going to make a good part of the world uninhabitable. The nuclear fallout hitting the atmosphere. What is going to happen? It could take us back to primitive life if this happens. And if you look at the country with nuclear weapons now, number one, these are approximations because you don't know what people do in private. Number one, the United States has approximately 5,044 nuclear weapons. Okay, the Russians have 5,580. They have more than the Americans. UK has got 225 nuclear weapons. France has got 290. China has got 500. This is what's reported now. You don't know what they have in secret. India has 172. Be surprised. Pakistan has 170. And the North Koreans, they have 50. But quiet as it's kept, Israel, they claim what is reported, or so-called reported, is 90, but they estimate they have somewhere between 75 and 400 nuclear warheads. Okay, but they will not announce their weapons publicly. So we are at the doorstep of a nuclear catastrophe, 90 seconds away, according to the doomsday clock. And so this is the context which is in back of us now, why we are looking at this particular subject. And of course, we are looking at the Muslim world itself. And there is a hadith reported in Abu Dawood and Ibn Majah and Imam Ahmed. It's a tough one. It's really tough. And every time I read it, I shiver, for what the Prophet ﷺ actually knew and what he actually gave to us, because we're seeing this played out right in front of us. But he said, on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, Ummati hadihi ummatun marhuma. Laysa alayha adhabun fil akhirah, adhabuha fid dunya al-fitan wa zalazil wal qatl. Ruwahu Ahmed. The Prophet ﷺ said, this my ummah is a nation that has mercy on it. Its punishment will not be in the hereafter, but in this life. That being fitna, earthquakes, and murder or genocide. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying that this ummah, we are blessed with the kalima. And if a person has the kalima of La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah ﷺ, that person, if that was a real belief that they had, they will eventually enter paradise. There are some people who will go directly to paradise. There are others who will, because of the sins and the wrongs that they have done, they will enter into hellfire. And according to our traditions, there is a group, they are called Jahannamiyun. These are the people of Jahannam, of hell, Muslims. But because of the wrongs that they have done, they will suffer in the fire for a period of time. And when they have suffered enough to equal the wrongs that they have done, because of the kalima, they will enter paradise. And that might sound like, okay, so we can do wrong. No, take a fire and put it on your hand. Literally, feel the pain. So Jahannam is real. and the hereafter is real. But what is happening here is that the Prophet ﷺ is saying, okay, but what is our punishment? It's not in the next life. Okay, the punishment is in this life. And you could say that this punishment is like pain, right? And pain is not always a negative thing. In some cases, pain is actually good. If you are stabbed or if you are cut, there's more pain in the healing process, generally, than it is when you get the wound. Why? That pain is serving a purpose. The body is healing itself. And of course, if you have pain in your hand, you're not going to dip it in water. You're going to protect it. You're going to cover it. You're going to try to keep it away from contact. If you didn't have the pain, you'd be doing a lot of things. So that pain is actually a blessing to the person who is receiving the pain. Okay, so this you could say is like a wake-up call. What is the wake-up call? And this is a shocking thing about this hadith that he said is fitna, right? Fitna is like trials, tribulations, gray areas, temptations that is coming down upon us. And we're surrounded by this fitna, this gray area, this confusion. The second is earthquakes or natural catastrophes. I was checking on some of the climate issues, and the people who study the climate catastrophes, they said two of the greatest catastrophes that happens, the earthquakes that hit Turkey and also North Africa. This is like the Muslim world, right? Tsunamis hitting Muslim world. And you're going to see, it's like a wake-up call. So it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger that we're being jolted out of our sleep. And last is genocide. And this is being clearly displayed with the genocide happening in Palestine, in Palestine. You can also see a man-made genocide in a sense, although the term is not being used. But what's happening in the Sudan, is a catastrophe. And it's man-made because there are groups that are supporting two factions causing confusion. So this is a wake-up call to the Muslim world that is happening in the last days. And because of this wake-up call, what is it that we are waking up from? And where can we possibly go? This is where we are looking at the important verse, because we're crying for change. We're making dua. One of the imams is actually saying, it's amazing. He said, there's about 1 million Jumu'ah khutbahs being made on Friday. It's like millions of them, right? But you're not really getting an answer. So we're going to take a break right now because Maghrib Salat has come in. And shortly, inshallah, we will continue for the orientation class, the context of our class on Minarets and Thrones. So I leave you with this. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala Sayyidina Mursaleen wa alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, when we look at the extent of the Muslim world, the amount of people, and even the amount of masjids and jumas, it's amazing. And people are making their dua. People are crying for change. People are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring about a political change. So there are many who are trying to develop an Islamic state. There are others who are trying to develop Islamic economy. Some want social change. People need movement. People need the help of Allah. But Allah said in Surah Al-Ra'd, verse 11, "Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim." Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change that which is in themselves. So this is critical. It's a critical understanding that we have to do something on the inside. Who are we as a Muslim world? Who are we? Are we just people who eat halal food, who wear certain clothes, who make pilgrimage, who have certain names? What is the Muslim world? It's been over 100 years since we've even had a Khalifa, a person to lead the whole Muslim world. And it's like rumbling, but the potential is there. And if you look at the potential of the Muslim world, it's amazing. We have over 26% of the Earth's population. You'll see Muslims all over the place. There's millions even in China, Indonesia, even in Europe. We're rich in natural resources. Much of the mineral wealth of the world lies under our countries. We have strategic positions, and you can see the strategic positions in terms of the movement of resources in the world. Just areas like the Red Sea, areas like the coastlines in Southeast Asia, the trade routes going from China, what they call the Silk Road. So many strategic positions that Muslims are actually in as a nation. Okay? We have huge standing armies. And because of the online media now, you're getting pictures of the Muslims marching there, and the Chechen soldiers, and the Arab world, and Pakistan, with their feet raised in the air, and so many brilliant, brave soldiers that are there standing at arms, literally armies that are standing at arms. We also have youth. We have one of the youngest nations in the world. 60% of Muslims are under 25. So we have a lot of young people. We have this great potential of the future. And we have resources, quiet as it's kept. We still have our basic teachings intact. We have much of our history still that we can go to see what happened in the past. Being able to carry it out, what's our potential? We have literally the richest families in the world. And you will see even Europe, even right here in Toronto, you go down to the lakeshore and you will see, buildings. One time somebody was talking about the huge condominiums and buildings being built in the Toronto waterfront, and many of them are owned by people in the Gulf, not Canadians. So we have wealth. We have history of respect. So, we've done so much. Even with all the calamities in the world, people are accepting Islam still. It's the fastest growing religion in the world. Most people are leaving religion, but there's a contradiction. And that really is part of what we're trying to unwind in this course. This contradiction, how to come out of the contradiction. That you have all this wealth, but yet you have poverty. How can we as a nation come out of this? You have huge armies, but yet you're being defeated. You're being humiliated. Even though you have huge armies, strong warriors, some of the greatest MMA, UFC fighters of the world, Muslims, but yet humiliation on the ground. We have intellectuals, we have poets, so much, but many of our debates go online and you will see many of the scholars and community leaders, they're debating over minor issues when there are major issues facing our nation. You'll find scholars sometimes, arguing over the names and descriptions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, how do you interpret these? What is the importance of that? It's irrelevant in terms of what is going on the ground. And it's something that scholars in the past would work out amongst themselves. Okay, but on the ground, it causes a type of frustration because with all this potential power that we have, right, there's a feeling of frustration, and this is all over the place. That people are saying with all this possible strength, then where are we going? How are we going to come out of this? And this leads us really to the essence of what we are talking about. There's something with Muslims themselves. Who are we? What really is the religion? And how can we be sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order that Allah would help us, inshallah, to come out of this confusion that we're presently in? Okay, so one of the theme hadiths in this is a famous tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is considered to be one of the Jami' hadiths. There's certain ones that you can build a whole religion off of, like the famous Hadith Jibreel, where the Prophet ﷺ is talking about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. So there's certain hadith like this. This is one of the important ones. It has different riwayas or different versions. And this one, in reported in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ will say, Adinu nasiha, that the essence of religion is sincerity. Qulna liman ya Rasulullah. So he said, O Messenger of Allah, who is this sincerity for? And he said, Lillahi wa li rasulihi wa li kitabihi wa li amatil muslimina wa khasatihim. Okay, so this is what our sincerity is supposed to be. And some people might look at the word nasiha, right? Because, we use Arabic words in English. Okay, so people who don't speak Arabic use Arabic words, but or even in their own languages. You say fitna, it means a lot of things in a lot of languages. Sometimes it just means, magic or something, or you're causing a confusion. So nasiha, generally how we use this in the West, nasiha generally means advice. So if you were to say that to somebody, give me nasiha. Okay, so that generally means advice. Okay, but nasaha, the verb itself also means to purify something. So when you have metals and you want to purify the metal, then you put it to the fire. And the fire then takes out impurities in it. The same like you have leather and hide. You purify it. So that purification process, that's where nasiha, that's a form of nasiha too. And also it means support, that you support somebody as well. So if you look at the hadith, then the Prophet ﷺ is saying that, the essence of religion is to be sincere to Allah. Can you give Allah nasiha? No. Can you give Rasulullah ﷺ nasiha? No. So that word does not apply to this, you see? Or that shade of the meaning. Okay? Can you give the Quran nasiha? No. Now, the last two, Muslims, you can give advice to Muslims, you can give advice to leaders. Okay, but when you really look at it, it's more like support, sincerity. So we translate that as being, the complete advice in sincerity. It's really sincerity. The essence is sincerity and support. Okay, so how can we be sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And in this, and it's a whole study in itself, but there was one great scholar, Sidi Ahmed Zarruq, of what is now Morocco and Libya, and he did a book where he wrote about an-nasihat al-kafiya liman khassahu Allahu bil-afiyah. So this is the complete advice for those who Allah has blessed with well-being. And he used this hadith as the base. And this scholar was one of those encyclopedic scholars who would take a small meaning and give you a whole long explanation. Okay, so just to give you, a look at this hadith breaks it into 5 areas. Okay, advice to Allah, His Messenger, His book, the Muslims, and the leaders of the Muslims. Okay, so how are we sincere to Allah? Number 1, follow His commands. And number 2, aid His religion. Right? You want to be sincere to Allah? Then come to the aid of Islam. When you see Muslims, it's not just talk. Right? You have to come to the aid. And submit to Allah's judgment. At-taslim li hukmihi. This is what our scholar said. At-taslim li hukmi. You have to submit to the judgment of Allah. So if somebody dies, you have to submit. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You have to submit to it. Okay? But there are some things which is in our control. There's some things that we're doing. Right? And that's where Tawbah comes in, repentance. And there's a long discussion about this, which is not, the basis of, what our class is tonight, but just give you a taste of this. The second part, sincerity to the Messenger of Allah. And this is a big thing now. You see it on the internet and all around because we are in Rabi al-Awwal and we are going into the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is a big issue now. Do you celebrate the Mawlid? Okay, and this is not the essence of our discussion tonight. But basically, how are you sincere to the Prophet ﷺ? Sidi Ahmed Zarruq broke it down. You really want to be sincere to the Messenger of Allah. It's not just having a celebration, a birthday party. Follow his sunnah. You got to follow the sunnah. And second, ash-shafaqa ala ummati. You have to have compassion on the Muslims. You got to have this emotional compassion. You see Muslims suffering, you've got to feel it, right? You really want to be sincere to the Messenger, have compassion on his ummah, and honor his family. So you honor his family and his memory. This is the crucial thing. In terms of the Mawlid, and question might come up, I'm not a mufti, but to be honest with you, it was never celebrated in his time, nor in the Sahaba's time, nor in the Tabi'een. It was only like 1,000 years after his death that they started it in Egypt to actually have a celebration. Because in terms of the actual date of his birth, there's difference of opinion. It's not fixed as to which actual day in Rabi al-Awwal it was. Okay, so it was never celebrated in the early times. Later it was. So the balanced scholars will say that if during this time period you want to get together and, remember the life of the Prophet ﷺ and, give advice, do good things, give sadaqah, fine. But don't make an Eid out of it. Do not make a holiday which is equal to Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. Because then you're falling in the area of bid'ah. That's the area of innovations, right? But to remember the Prophet ﷺ, to encourage people, to talk about his sunnah, to gather people together, nothing wrong with that. As long as it's not considered to be, an Eid or part of our religion. So this is a side topic. The next one, sincerity to the Book of Allah. How can we be sincere to the Book of Allah? One, to perfect its recitation, the tajweed. But that's not all. You have to contemplate on its verses and then follow its commands. Okay? If you do that, now you're sincere. That's the complete sincerity to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not just words, right? It's a complete sincerity. And how are you sincere to Muslims? Not just by making dua for them, and that's important, but we need to defend the honor of the Muslims, defend their honor. And if somebody's talking about another Muslim, we're innocent until proven guilty. If Muslims in a part of the world, they say these terrorists or these this or that, don't accept it. We have an honor, about us, and we have to defend that. And secondly, we need to establish the rights of the Muslims. And that will come in an area, even if you call the adhan in a place where there's no adhan, you establish salat, that's the rights. If somebody dies, somebody's got to do janazah. And if nobody does janazah, it's considered fard kifaya, so that somebody has to do it. The whole community is living in sin. Okay? So, and third, come to their assistance. If you really want to be sincere to Muslims, come to their assistance. And that is our nasiha. Now, the key point in our discussion is the one on leadership. And Sidi Ahmed Zarruq, he broke the leadership into three parts. He said there is the umara, and there is the fuqara, and there is the ulama. So the umara are your amirs. So that's like your kings and amirs and leaders. They have political power. They have the gun. They're the sultan. Okay, your amirs. Two, you have the fuqara, and these are people who, fuqara generally means like poor people, but in this case, he was talking about spiritual people. Some would say the Sufis, or the ones who are practicing tasawwuf, which means ihsan. So now the higher level of Islam, the spirituality of Islam. Okay? People who claim to have ihsan or who are teaching ihsan. Okay? And that's a very heavy topic, because somebody might ask, how do you pray? But then the other question comes, how do I improve my salat? Okay, how do I really, get the feelings of the salat itself? Okay, so that is sincerity to that group. And the third group in the leadership, the third level of the leadership is ulama. Okay, and these are the people who have the knowledge of Islam in terms of the knowledge of the revelation, right? That is for the Quran, the Hadith, the Tafsir, the Fiqh, right? This is what we're using when we talk about ulama itself. Although the reality is that in some cases, in most cases, the real ulama also had ihsan. So those two levels can actually be combined in one. But Sidi Ahmed Zarruq, this particular scholar, he was considered muhtasab al-ulama wal-awliya. He was the quality control manager of the scholars and the Sufis who claim spirituality. It's rare you find somebody like that. He was in North Africa, so he was the highest faqih in Maliki fiqh. So that's the Maliki school of thought. He was like the highest level. So any judgment you had in jurisprudence, right, he was like the hujjah. He was like on the top of the people who understood the Maliki fiqh in his time. At the same time, in terms of what the people of Tasawwuf call the tariqah, right, those who are moving in an organized way for ihsan, he was the highest level. Like they say, the qutub. So he was the highest level. But what he used to do, he used to correct both sides. So if the ulama are going wrong, he would correct the ulama. If the people of Tasawwuf are going wrong, he'd correct them. And they even asked him one time, are there any major scholars in Tasawwuf now? Where are the scholars of Tasawwuf? And he said, see that cemetery over there? They're in there. Like, that's how critical he was of what was going on. Okay? So he gives his judgment now. And this is sort of like the basis of where we're going with this understanding. And he said, and this is highly controversial now, what he's saying, but it's so straightforward. He said, your political leaders, your amirs, your sultans, your kings, he said, you obey them as long as they obey Allah. If they don't obey Allah, there's no ta'ah, no obedience. That's a deep statement. You get hung in some parts of the Muslim world if you publicly came out. But the hadith is there. La ta'al al-makhluq fi ma'siyat al-khaliq. There's no obeying the creation when the creation disobeys Allah. So he said, follow the leaders, follow the ulama, the umara, as long as they obey Allah. But if they don't, you don't have to follow them. Okay? The fuqara, if a person claims spirituality, then and he's got good qualifications, then he said you can accept these people as long as they stay within the limits of Sharia. If they go outside of Islamic law, don't follow them. You ask for advice on something, and they say, go in the room and stand on your head, for 10 hours and say Allah, Allah, Allah. Okay, that's not in Sharia. That's not in the Sunnah. So you don't have to follow them in that. But if they have qualifications and they're taking you to a level of ihsan that can help you, then you can accept what they're saying. And for the ulama, and this is going deeply into the area, we're going to be talking about it in more details as we go along. For the ulama, he said you acknowledge the scholars as long as they have authentic proof, dalil. As long as the scholars have proof, you can accept, you can acknowledge them. You should, because that's what they're trained to do. Everybody can't spend 10, 20, 30 years of their life studying. It's like a brain surgeon. You might know first aid, right? But if somebody has a problem with their brain, you don't use first aid from a scouting group to help somebody with their brain. You bring in a surgeon who's trained. So similarly, there are ulama as well who are trained on the higher levels of Islamic knowledge. Then they will come in, for the special areas of Islam. So this is what Sidi Ahmed Zarruq, broke down. And it is this area, you see, these two areas, you have the amirs and you have the other two areas. You can say fuqara and ulama. We're going to see it's really the same thing. Okay, because if somebody's in the fuqara and they're not within Sharia, that's irrelevant to us. That's irrelevant. If they are within Sharia, then in a sense, they are amongst the ulama. So these are the two areas we're talking about when we say minarets and thrones, right? What is the relationship between these groups? And we might say, okay, what is the purpose of this? Okay, what's the value in this? We're trying to understand what is wrong with us. What is wrong with the Muslim world? Why do you have so many people who are making dua, who are crying in the night? Right? And you don't see any change coming about in front of you. You don't see people moving, right? Marshal al-Aqsa under attack. You don't see the armies moving. Okay, so something's wrong, and there's a lot of different areas. But one of the areas is amongst the ulama, it's amongst the scholars, and the relationship with those who are in authority in the Muslim world. And the Prophet ﷺ on one authentic hadith was reported to have said, "Inna fi ummati ma akhwafu alayhi min ad-dajjal." Wa karraraha an-nabiy sallallahu alayhi wa sallam 3 marrat. فسئل عن ذلك فقال الأئمة الضالون. Rawahu Ahmed. The Prophet ﷺ said, there is something that I fear for my ummah more than Dajjal. Who is Dajjal? The Antichrist. We have discussed this before. Dajjal is considered to be the greatest fitna that will ever come in Islamic history, in the life of this ummah, is Dajjal. But he said, I fear something even more than a Dajjal. Okay? And he said it 3 times. So when he said 3 times, he's serious, right? And then he said, misguided and astray leaders. And another riwayah, he said, وَإِنَّمَا أَخَافُ عَلَى أُمَّتِي الْأَئِمَّةُ الْمُضِلِّينَ. So one time he's saying the scholars are darleen, and the second, al-mudillin. So a darleen is somebody who has gone astray. Like even we say in Fatiha, غَيْرُ مَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. So we say we don't want to be, guide us to the straight path, not those who you're angry with or those who have gone astray. Right? That's darleen. So these leaders, they are darleen. Okay? But there's also the leaders, and this word a'imma is imam, right? It's the plural of imam. So it's these imams and these leaders who are mudillin. So mudillin is worse than darleen, because mudillin is not just somebody who's gone astray, but it's somebody who would take you astray. That's worse, right? Okay, so this is what he's talking about. So this is something really serious. So this issue is a crucial issue because the Muslim world, and especially those countries surrounding Philistine, even the Muslim world outside, where are they? Why are they not moving? And the people will say it's the leaders. It's not the masses of the people. Because the masses of the Muslims, for the most part, are crying and feeling what is happening to the Palestinian people. They're crying on the inside. But the leaders, for whatever the reason is, there are some who are trying in their own way. They might be caught in a fitna, confusion. Everybody's not the same. But something's holding up the leadership. So this giant who's sleeping, waking up, that's the Muslim world. It can't move. So why can't it move? That is what we want to look at. And if we look at Islamic history, we will go back and try to see at different points in our history, we will try to see the relationship between, remember those 2 areas that Ahmed Zarruq said, Umara and Ulama. So these are the 2 areas. We want to look at the relationship, and when the relationship is in sync, right? When they are moving together, victory. Islam rising. When the ulama submit to tyrants, when they become hypocrites to their own teachings, then the tyrants are out of control, and you see that Muslims go down. That's what Ibn Khaldun spoke about, the cyclical nature of Islamic societies itself. Sometimes we're up, and sometimes we are down. So this cyclical nature, right, that has something to do with the relationship of the leaders to the followers, or the leaders to the scholars. Okay, so this is the context. This is the context of our class that we will be going into in detail to show you some living examples of the relationship. We want to first learn who are the ulama, who are the true scholars, what actually is it? Because some people claim it, but they're not. Okay, what does it actually mean, how serious it is? Because one of the keys to our future, right? Then the relationship between the scholars and the leaders. So I want to open up the floor for any questions that anybody may have in our context. This is the context of where we are coming from for our class on Minarets and Thrones. We have people online as well. Sometimes last classes we had 200 people online, so that's why I'm sort of looking like this sometimes, right? So the floor is open for any questions that anybody may have concerning this thing. Floor is open.
I didn't understand still the difference between ulama and fuqara.
Yeah.
I thought both are religious. This one.
Yeah. So I mean, Ahmed Zarruq, really, to be honest, in the early stage of Islam, in the Sunnah, there's no difference between the two. Because remember the hadith of Jibreel where the angel asked the Prophet, what is Islam? What is Iman? And what is Ihsan? Okay, so what is Islam? That's the 5 pillars of Islam. The Prophet's answer, what is Iman? That's the 5 pillars of Iman, to believe in Allah and His angels and His books. And what is Ihsan? That is righteousness. That's your spirituality, to worship Allah as though He sees you or you see Him. It's the higher level of Islam, like your taqwa, your ihsan. Okay? In the beginning, it's all the same. There's no separation. But as time went by, and as Islam began to spread, and people started to specialize in certain areas, okay, you would see that there were some people who were more geared towards spiritual things, right? And there were others who were more geared towards book knowledge. And institutions start to develop. And even subjects like tafsir, to explain the Quran, that was never there in the Prophet's time. You just get the explanation. Fiqh, what is Islamic jurisprudence? It was basically Quran and Sunnah. But later on, people are accepting Islam and they need a system to know how to purify themselves, how to pray, how to fast, how to give zakat. That's fiqh. So people specialize in fiqh. Okay? So now, but some people have spiritual problems. So there were individuals who were known for this, like Al-Hasan al-Basri. This is Tabi'een. This is like very close, but he's known for this spiritual, although he's a scholar as well. It starts to separate. So by the time Ahmed Zarruq is coming along, which is like, 600 years ago, they're in groups. There's some people who actually go into the spirituality heavily and focus on it, and there are others who go into the fiqh heavily, but there are some who combine both. And that's what Ahmed Zarruq was trying to do. Okay, so that's why he looked at the two. But for us, really, like I said, the area of fuqara, of somebody who's dealing with spirituality and goes outside of Sharia, is irrelevant to us. And there are some people who are influenced by Hinduism, by Buddhism, and they brought it into Islam. They're influenced by magic, and they brought it into Islam. So you actually see people doing magical formulas in Arabic language. And you see people fortune tellers. And you see casting spells. And you're doing all types of strange things, in the name of scholarship, which has nothing to do with the scholarship. Okay? So this really is what we're talking about. The fuqara would be irrelevant for us. So it basically becomes the two groups, the umara and the ulama. Okay? Like that. Okay? Any questions online that anybody has, or comments of anything online?
We have 3 questions. I think this first one might be a little bit off topic, but
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. The gesture of bringing the right hand to the heart is in greeting another Muslim. Is this sunnah?
Right. Okay. Just can you close that door for a second? Somebody's reading. I don't think it's bothering anybody, but it is a recitation being done. As far as putting the on your like this thing like that, or in some Muslim cultures they even go like this, or whatever. It's not actually something recorded from the Sunnah. It's not actually recorded from the Sunnah. But if people are doing it in the sense of out of trying to show respect, not claiming that it's Sunnah, there's nothing actually wrong with it, right? The problem is where bid'ah comes in is when people say that these acts, these cultural things that they do are actually Sunnah and you must do it. Okay, this is where the problem is. And I know that you'll see Turkish movies and things like that when the name of the Prophet ﷺ is mentioned, they will put their hand on their hearts. Okay? And so there's nothing wrong with that as long as the person doesn't think that it's actually originally Sunnah. Now, another question.
I heard Imam Abu Hanifa took his sword to the leadership 3 times. Can you elaborate on that?
Abu Hanifa took his sword to the leadership 3 times. I don't know. I've never heard of that before. But Abu Hanifa was not a person who's using the sword. He's a knowledgeable person, a teacher. So it doesn't sound right. I'll check it out, but it does not sound right. No, Allah knows best.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Quick. Will this class focus on contemporary affairs or scholar-ruler relations in Muslim history? Clearly, that would be a very comprehensive series of courses.
Yes, so this is really looking at different times in history to look at the relationship between the scholars and the leaders, okay? Whether it's positive ones or negative ones, when they were in sync and Islam was up, when it was down, in order to make a way for today, or in order to understand what's going on today. Because you have a lot of scholars who are claiming to be scholars. They have giant hats and giant beards, and they have all types of things, but what are they doing, right? To try to answer this. And you'll see historically, you can see what's going on if you look at the history. So we're using history to understand today, okay? And also to chart a way, inshallah, for the future, for the coming generations to come. Now, question.
One last question here. Why is the coming back of the Khalifa feared?
Okay, that's a little bit off topic, the coming back to Khalifa. But basically, it's not feared by Muslims. It is the prayer of the Muslims that our leaders ultimately come back, because after the Prophet ﷺ, these were the successes. Muslim world needs to be united. Okay, but it is feared by the colonial powers, by those who are trying to crush Islam, because the Crusaders, it's feared by them because they don't want Muslims to have central leadership to be able to stand up as a world power. It's not 100% necessary. There's debates about this, that every single section of the Muslim world is all under one leader. That's going to be maybe difficult. But central leadership to a great extent, Majlis al-Shura, for the Muslim world is necessary at this point in time. And it is our prayer, that a Khalifa can come back, inshallah, for the future of the Muslim world. Now, okay. Any other questions anybody has here? So we've come to an end to this particular class. This is the orientation, section, for that. So we will be looking at this relationship of the Umara and the Ulama, looking at the relationship. It is crucial to understand what is going on today. So we want to understand who are the scholars, the importance of the scholars, what is their relationship to the leaders, and inshallah, this will answer some of the questions that we have today and maybe give us guidance as to where we go in the future. So I leave these thoughts with you, and I ask Allah to have mercy on me and you. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.